Hey everyone, so I'm going to be sharing my Chem 349 experience at SF State with Dr. Runquist and how I went from having a D in the class to getting an A for my final grade. Here we go! I went into the first exam feeling pretty good about it. I left the exam feeling good. And maybe about a week later, I was super excited because we were gonna get the test back. Like, we are gonna celebrate. We're gonna have a good night because I'm pretty sure I got an A or a B on this test. There was no type of celebrating that night whatsoever. It's the end of class and she's getting ready to hand back the tests and it's my turn to get my test. And immediately I look at my test and there's like red all over my first page. So I go all the way to the back because that's where the grade is. And let me tell you, my heart fell to the ground like 6 feet under with my grade. I got a D. I got a 52 out of 80. And I was like, how did this happen? You know, I was like holding back the tears. People were like, how did you do? And I'm like, don't ask me about anything. I left that class and I sat in my car for like 20 minutes and I cried because I was so upset. And I realized like I need to obviously change how I'm doing things. I need to change my ways. I have to change my studying habits, change my perspective on this class. And that's what I did. I'm going to share with you some of those things that I did to help me get an A in the class, and hopefully they work for you or kind of, I don't know, maybe help you in some way if you're in somewhat of a similar situation. The first thing that I did was I did tour of biochem, the reading and the questions before every single lecture. On the syllabus, it tells you what reading is kind of complementary to the lecture for that day. So before class the next day, I would go through that list and make sure that I am going through exactly what is going to be covered in that lecture. And sometimes, you know, I was tired some days, I just couldn't do it. So I would go to bed, I would wake up maybe like 45 minutes early and I would get that reading in. And I would really try to understand what I was reading, because what I realized is that when I come to class, I have no idea what she's talking about. And it's okay because the information is very challenging and it's stuff that you may not be familiar with. And when I started doing the reading before class, I knew what was being talked about. I would go to class and she would ask a question and in my head I would be like,
oh, I know that one.
Or sometimes I would even raise my hand and be like,
oh, I know the answer to that.
And people would look at me like, but I didn't care. I was like, I am actually understanding this stuff. So make sure you do the tour of biochem questions and the reading before every single lecture so you can follow along. And this actually gives you time to like formulate questions before class. So that way you can ask these questions in class. You already have the questions formulated. Sometimes it takes time to like even think about questions. So if you're doing the reading before class, then by the time you get to class and you go through all this stuff again, you can come up with questions and she can answer them for you. So the second thing I did was I went to office hours pretty frequently. It was a little bit challenging for me because I was working and sometimes my shifts would fall on the times of her office hours, but I made an effort to kind of email her and try to get in office hours that weren't during her regular office hour time. And I think it's important to go because there you're gonna feel comfortable to ask her questions that you may have not been comfortable to ask in class, and she'll actually help you go in depth with the material in office hours. In lecture, there's less than 50 minutes to go through like a whole section of material, so it makes sense as to why she's going super fast. But in office hours, you can take pieces of things that you don't understand and kind of like zoom in and get a better understanding of what's really being taught. So the third thing that I did was take extremely detailed notes, okay? So what I would do is I would print out the notes that she put on iLearn the day before or that morning. I would print them out, and I printed them out pretty small. Put about 4 slides to 1 page because ain't nobody got money to be printing like 50 pages every lecture. So you know, this is about 6 pages. It's not bad. I would print out the notes and then I would write my own notes exactly on the sheet, like so. And I also used a colored pen to kind of help organize everything, because sometimes I would write formulas, sometimes I would write side notes, I would write the clicker questions if they weren't inside the packet already. So I used a color pen. I got it from Target for like $5. It came with like 10 different colors. I think it's really important to print out the notes before instead of trying to write everything down, because they're gonna go so quick. You won't have time to write, you won't have time to draw this, okay? It's gonna take too much time to draw graphs like this. Like, don't do that to yourself. If you can, print out the notes before class, and it doesn't have to be in color, it can be in black and white. And then what you can do is you can also write on your notes questions that you have and bring those to office hours and get those questions answered. So a little sub tip, this is a motto that I suggest you strongly follow or live by. Don't let the week go by without getting your questions answered, because if you're finding that you're accumulating questions throughout the week, do what you can to get those questions answered. Go to office hours, and if you can't go to office hours, send her an email with those questions, and hopefully she can respond to you with answers. And if not, she'll tell you to come in and talk to her personally, and that's even better. Fourth thing I did was I looked over all of the questions that Dr. Rundquist put on iLearn, and I didn't just go off of these to prepare me for my test, because they're not going to give you the same questions. What they will do is maybe ask you a similar question that covers the same concept, but it's going to have different values, or it's going to be like different. It's going to be different. So for example, what two colors make green? I'm going to put blue and yellow. So what I would create a question that says, what two colors make purple? And some of my questions that I made appeared on my test. It was perfect. It just, when that happens to you, just everything seems to fall in place. The fifth thing that I did was I formed study groups only when I thought they would be beneficial to me. So what I mean by that is I do not work well in study groups if I'm not confident or if I'm not very prepared with the material that we're covering in the study group. So when I join study groups unprepared, I have no idea what everyone's talking about. They'll be like talking about the differences between hemoglobin and myoglobin, and I'll be like, one starts with an M and one starts with an H. Study groups were not beneficial to me if I didn't know what was going on. What I did find helpful was that once I was confident with the material, I would join study groups and I would teach other people what I knew. That seemed to really help like ingrain certain topics into my head and prepared me super well for the test. You kind of just have to find what works best for you. If you study really well in study groups, by all means join a study group. If you don't work well in a study group, then work independently and then join a study group when you think it'll be beneficial to you, because that's what I did and it worked. The last tip is to try to find some relevance in what I was learning. Biochemistry is very challenging, it's very hard, but when you're able to kind of connect what you're doing in class to like real life things, it'll make it that much more enjoyable to learn and that much more like easygoing, if that makes sense. For example, if you're looking at an oxygen binding curve or myoglobin, try to understand like why you're even learning this, like why is this important? Try to understand like how this can be used in the real world. If you are planning to be like a scientist, a researcher, a physician, a nurse, whatever the case, try to find some type of relevance in the stuff that you're learning, because you're spending a lot of time with it, you know what I mean? And find a way to connect to what you're doing. With that being said, I think it's important to also find a balance between studying and things that make you happy. A lot of people will say like go hard, sleep, eat, breathe, studying. The burnout for that is very real. So I think it really helps to find like a sweet balance between studying and also doing things that make you happy, because ultimately happiness matters, your sanity matters. So find like that sweet balance that will help you excel in the class, also keep you at a good place in your life. So with that being said, take some time. If you're still kind of grieving over not doing well on the test, take some time for yourself, reflect on things that you're doing, things that you need to do differently, and go from there. Tell yourself that you're capable of doing it, because I know you are, and yeah, you got it.